So let's dig into the resume of Salvador Sanchez. Sanchez turned pro at just 16 years of age in 1975, and then at just 21 years of age with a record of 33-1-1, Sanchez challenges Danny Lopez for the WBC and Ring Magazine featherweight titles as quite a considerable underdog. Lopez was a huge punching featherweight who had been on a tremendous run of form as champion. He had since gone 18-0 with 17 knockouts, knocking out Chucho Castillo, who gave Ruben Olivares his first ever career loss. He also knocked out Ruben Olivares himself in 7 rounds. Olivares had just won the featherweight title and had cemented his claim as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, bantamweight of all time. Lopez then won the featherweight title in 1976 over David Kotai via unanimous decision, and he made 8 successful defences across 4 years, all of which ended via stoppage. He was the man at featherweight, but even at just 21 years of age, Salvador Sanchez was just too good, too strong and too fit, and pummeled Lopez to a 13th round TKO victory. This is going to be an S-tier win. Sanchez went into this fight as the underdog. S-tier win for Sanchez. Sanchez's first title defense came against Ruben Castillo. Castillo was a very good fighter, one of the best fighters to not be a world champion. He defeated Rocky Garcia, stepping in against prime versions of Alexis Arguello, Salvador Sanchez, Julio Cesar Chavez and Juan Laporte. You can't really get 4 harder fights in any division for titles than that. I think that he was still an A-tier fighter. I think that he would have been a world champion in many other eras, but I'm going to give this win an A-tier ranking for Sanchez. And then 2 months later, he rematched Lopez, having 3 fights in 4 months. I don't think you can really drop a ranking in just 4 months. Sanchez stops Lopez again via TKO in the 14th round. This is his second S-tier win. Then Sanchez takes on the undefeated Commonwealth champion, Patrick Ford. Ford was 5'10", so he was very tall for the weight, and he put in an exceptional performance against Salvador Sanchez. He was up on the cards at 12 rounds. I believe one of the judges actually scored this fight a draw, but Ford was a very good fighter. He would go on to lose to Eusebio Pedrosa, and Ford being stopped in the 13th round, whilst being up on the cards against him too. If you put Ford in the 12 round era, he may well have scored 2 of the best victories of his time. However, I think with those 2 performances, despite not having a major win, I'm going to put him in the B+ tier. Sanchez would then defend the title against future world champion Juan Laporte. Now, Laporte would go on to knock out Rocky Lockridge the very next year. As I touched upon earlier, he would face Ruben Castillo, which is where he would win the title himself years later. He would take the likes of Wilfredo Gomez, Julio Cesar Chavez and Kostya Tszyu, as well as Salvador Sanchez the distance. Laporte was a great fighter. I'm going to put him in the A+ tier. Sanchez then stops the Spanish European champion Roberto Castañón in 10 rounds. So I think putting him in the C tier is harsh, so I'm going to put him in the B tier. This was an absolute super fight against arguably the greatest Mexican boxer and the greatest Puerto Rican boxer ever in their respective primes. Gomez entered the ring with a record of 32-0 with 1 draw and 32 knockouts, but that draw was in his debut, so he had won all 32 of his previous fights via knockout. He had already won 14 super bantamweight world title fights, similarly all by knockout. He would win the remainder of his 4 super bantamweight title defences after this fight, all via knockout. He moved up to featherweight for this fight, and although this was Gomez's first title fight at featherweight, it's worth noting that a few years later, he beat the great Juan Laporte to become featherweight champion, before moving up to defeat the great Rocky Lockridge at super featherweight to become champion. So the fact that Gomez was already the greatest super bantamweight to ever live, and also he would be able to win titles at featherweight and super featherweight against great fighters in that division, is going to play a part in my ranking in this fight. I actually think you can put this victory in one of the greatest victories of all time, because this was a genuine super fight. Both men in their primes, both men fighting at weights they were world championship quality, and Sanchez took the fight to Gomez, dropping him in the first round, and these guys were exchanging furiously before Sanchez finally secured the stoppage in the 8th round to secure what I believe is the best win of his career. And I think a win of this level is a very historic win. Gomez would go on to be, in my opinion, the greatest Puerto Rican fighter to ever live. So I'm going to put this in the S+ tier win. And maintaining a grueling schedule, just 4 months later, Sanchez defeated Pat Caldell over 15 rounds. Now, Caldell was an excellent amateur boxer. coming out of England. He won the Olympic bronze medal in 1976, the Commonwealth Games gold medal, and he was a European bronze medalist as an amateur. As a pro, he won both British and European title fights. Now, he actually went to a split decision against Salvador Sanchez. Similarly, it was another fight in which Salvador Sanchez started slow. He knocked Caldell down very late in the 15th round to secure the victory. Caldell would be obliterated by Azuma Nelson years later in the first round, but a British and European champion in the pros with amateur pedigree who gave Salvador Sanchez in his prime a hard fight, I'm going to put him in the B tier. Then Sanchez takes on the final opponent of his career, without a doubt the greatest Ghanaian boxer to ever live, Azuma Nelson. Azuma Nelson would go on to be an all-time great. He would knock out Wilfredo Gomez 2.5 years after this fight to become the WBC featherweight champion. Nelson across his career would knock out other fighters like Jeff Fennick, Jesse James Leah, Gabriel Ruelas, also defeating Juan Laporte, becoming a 2-division champion with 19 different world title victories. Nelson would go on to be an absolute all-time great of the sport a couple of years after the Salvador Sanchez fight. However, it's worth noting that he had only been pro for just shy of 3 years and had only had 13 fights going into the Sanchez fight, all of which were in Africa. But he was yet to face a world level operator. He gave Sanchez a tough fight, a very tough fight, before being stopped in the 15th and final round. Just another showing of Sanchez's excellent stamina. But he took this fight on very late notice, and it was very early on in his career. If Sanchez had defeated a prime Azuma Nelson, it's undeniably an S tier win. But I'm going to put this in the A++ category for all of the reasons I said. And that marks the end of Sanchez's career. He was only 23 years old, and 1 month after the Azuma Nelson fight, he died in a fatal car crash, giving him a total score of 125 on the resume leaderboard. He was a world champion at featherweight for 2 years and 5 months, making 10 successful defences of the title and winning 11 world title fights in his career. It should be no surprise that Sanchez's average of 9.6 is the second highest on the leaderboard, solely behind Desert Charles. He retired with a record of 44 wins, to just 1 defeat and 1 draw, with 32 career knockouts. And that is Salvador Sanchez's resume. It's one of the greatest resumes of a fighter under the age of 25. He had achieved all of this 7 months before he was going to turn 24 years of age. It's one of the biggest what ifs, if not in my opinion, the biggest what if in boxing history, if Sanchez hadn't sadly lost his life in that car crash.